All right, welcome to our War Media Bears recap for Week 10, where the Bears fell to the Lions in a crazy game that ended 31-30. The Bears are now 3-7. I am Saul Rodriguez, along with my work colleague Ryan Bukovitsky. How are we doing today, man?
Hey, Saul, we're hanging in there. Not the most fun Bears Monday, especially after just a
Yeah.
terrible loss. But life goes on, and there's positives from the affair. It's at least I don't know about you, but some of those Nagy years, definitely the Trestman years, like you just and the Fox years, you just see so much bad football. And not that we're
Hmm.
seeing good football now, but there's reasons to watch, there's reasons to get excited versus before was just this black hole drain. So in a
Hmm.
way, I'm kind of like, whatever. I guess in a way, we're lucky this year if that counts.
Yeah, that's true. It's like everyone's like, we have a reason to watch the Bears, and you know, Justin Fields makes it exciting to watch. And even if they don't win, as don't get me wrong, losses always hurt regardless of because even though the Bears aren't technically supposed to win, right? Like the loss yesterday still hurts because they were so close. Same with like the Miami one, because they were so close to getting another upset. So they're still gonna why they lost and whatever, but it still sucks. But going kind of off what I said about Justin Fields, just another day where he was running around the defense. He had 147 rushing yards. And this one actually comes from Gabe Wilkins. You can see on War Media's open run every Wednesday. He said Justin Fields stands only just 457 yards away from setting the single season record for the most rushing yards ever by a QB in NFL history. He put it in perspective. He put Lamar Jackson with his 1,206 yards in 2019, and Fields already has 749 through 10 games. And then also I saw that this one was a crazier one too, because when you start talking about Walter Payton in conversations with the quarterback and just rushing in general, I think is pretty crazy. But he's the first Bear to run at least 147 yards in back-to-back games since Walter Payton. So yeah, what did you think about his performance, and not only his performance on the ground, but he threw for 167 yards. He was 12 for 20, nothing too wild there, but he had two touchdowns and interceptions. So what did you think about his overall performance this week?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was still a positive performance with obviously some teachable and learning
Hmm.
moments. A pick six that he's claimed he'll never do again. I mean, we'll see. I don't know if he can necessarily claim he'll never do a pick six again, but I get where he's coming from. Like, he is the type that wants to really work and correct their mistakes. And I think that right now, what you're seeing from him is the work showing. And it's that exact Theo Epstein kind of progress isn't linear. Like, he's
Hmm.
getting better. There's clearly a step up in his production and his play since the first month of the season, or even really the first month and a half of the season. So hopefully there's still another jump that we see this year. But overall, I think you just look at it as, you know, there's still positives with the passing game. Obviously, the run game, I don't know if we really even need to talk about his running ability is going to be amazing. If he can stay
Hmm.
healthy, it's always going to be a real big weapon for him. He's already looking like an MVP when it comes to that. What everybody is concerned about is marrying that ability with his arm and being that same kind of deadliness. Because if you are that with your arm as well as your legs, you're
Hmm.
literally unguardable in the NFL. And with the rules, how they're set up to be, you're really in trouble as a defense, regardless of what's around Justin Fields. It can be a bunch of nothing, or especially if it's a bunch of great pieces, you're going to be very extremely worried if you're a defensive coordinator preparing for the Bears. I thought he did some good things with his arm still, like just in general. It's great to see how much more comfortable in the pocket he is and how he doesn't really panic. And it seems like he's just taking his time more, so you just want to see more of that. And I think you want to see a little bit more just perfection in general. There was a couple plays where, that Cole Komet pass comes to mind where it was kind of broken up and Komet kind of had a one arm on it. Maybe the ball could have been a little bit better in terms of a little bit more advantageous for Cole Komet to be the only one to go after
Hmm.
it. But when you start nitpicking like that, I think you're on the right course as a quarterback. We're not talking like Mitch, where it's like, hey, can you hit the side of a barnyard past 20 yards? So I think there's plenty to to be happy about, even if it wasn't a great performance. I
Mhm,
just think, we have to always keep everything in perspective. He still doesn't have a lot of great talent around him. And even if he's improving, that doesn't mean the other talent around him is improving. And I think the other thing too is, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but like Chase Claypool, for example, earlier in the year, Luke Getzey, there was a lot of criticism for his play calling with the Bears and how he was using Justin Fields in that offense. And then there was a point in time after a few weeks, it seemed like they kind of made some adjustments after that mini bye week. And all of a sudden, that offense, maybe not humming, but nobody was saying, oh, we need to get rid of Luke Getzey, or what the hell does he know about calling
mhm,
plays? I feel like there's an element of that here. Clearly, he's a first time offensive coordinator. He's smart and he's picking things up, but he's learning on the job. And I wonder if, hey, some of these receivers, some of these weapons, like we're seeing Cole Kmet work a little bit better, Darnell work a little bit better. I think they're still trying to figure out N'Keal Harry, but he was out for a long time. So
mhm.
what role does he have? What plays make a lot of sense for him? And I think the same thing's happening with Chase Claypool. So I, in a way, want to see what it looks like, let's say beginning of December, when this team has had a few weeks together at that point.
Yeah, no, you make a good point too because there's a lot of shuffling with the wide receivers, right? Every week it's N'Keal Harry's inactive or Velus Jones is inactive, and it's not always about injury. I mean, they asked Matt Eberflus, and he said they just thought with the pairing of the wide receivers that were out there were better for this week and all that. So you talked about him a little bit, but were you surprised? I guess what I say or what I ask in the Chase Claypool perspective because like he wasn't used as much as kind of the coaching staff alluded to. They were saying throughout the week that he was going to get more reps and all that. And or do you think more it's just the reason he wasn't used is because it's still kind of easing him into the process?
Yeah, I mean, my initial instinct, if I was, let's say, an offensive coordinator, is, hey, I know Chase can run a few different routes, and I got a quarterback that knows how to throw it. Let's just kind of get some shots up in the air and just let his go up and get it. Try to be the difference here, rather
Mhm,
than, hey, let's call wing right 45Z left flip Z, and if he's got that open break on cover three, then we want him to go the football to go. Like I would kind of get rid of some of that stuff and be like, you know what? We need Chase Claypool to make an impact here. Let's have him do a go route. If you got man coverage, throw it up to that guy and let's see what he can do. I am surprised that maybe he didn't get a little bit more than we anticipated, but there's nuances sometimes with some of that. Like, were the plays being called for Chase
mhm.
Claypool? And let's say a Jeffrey Okuda, who's a great cornerback, was he just simply taking him away? Where Justin Fields, without having that rapport, without having that trust of, hey, if I just throw it, I know Claypool's going to come down with it. Maybe they don't have that quite yet. And if you don't have that and a guy is covered, maybe you don't go to him as often then. Maybe you're not trying to force it in there and you say, you know what, I like Cole Komet, who's a little bit more wide open. Let me go to him instead of Chase Claypool. So I think that there's a balance there where you can kind of emphasize the receiver, get more from him, definitely call more like plays where it's just Chase, you're 6'4" and a monster. Just go up and get this thing. We don't
Mhm.
care if you're running this break perfectly here. You don't need to go 7 yards versus 8 yards or whatever to get open. We just need you around, like going deep and go up there and get this ball when it's thrown to you, type thing. But I would be only concerned if we start seeing this a lot, or if we don't see kind of, like I said, the beginning of December-ish. If Chase Claypool is pretty he's pretty suspect and missing from this offense. You're a little bit concerned at that point because they don't have a ton of time with him. You only have one more year after this year, so you have to put some emphasis on making this work sooner than later.
But yeah, no, that's what I was thinking with Okuda that I thought maybe, they were focusing a lot more on Claypool because we all know Darnell Mooney's a talented wide receiver, but if Claypool and Mooney are on the field, who has shown more up to this point? It's Claypool, so they're going to focus on him, and I think that's one of the things that I think I not necessarily might hurt them because at the end of the day, we did say it would, where we talked about before on this show that it would help guys like Komet as it's showing, or guys like Mooney as well. But it's going to be a process, a learning process, because they haven't really been in that position before, where you have a guy like Claypool or just a guy, not and again, I don't want to like, say Claypool's like Stephon Diggs or something, but it's just the type of talent he is, the type of the size and all that. So that's what I was thinking about too, because you said that about Akuda. So he obviously showed his talents as well with that pick six. But going on now to the defense, Lake Zurich's very own Jack Sanborn, man, the linebacker, he's playing his tail off, 12 tackles, 12 total tackles on Sunday, 2 for loss and 2 sacks. What have you thought about his play?
I think it's a great story. I've been a fan of his from what little I've seen of him on the Bears. Sorry, I don't really watch a ton of Wisconsin football or Big Ten
Mhm,
football to begin with, but um, ultimately, I don't think he's going to be any type of starter for you when this team gets good. But I see a Nick Kwiatkowski type player right there, and maybe a little bit better than Nick Kwiatkowski. And I don't want to downplay that. There was a lot of times where we had injuries in that inside linebacker position, one of them being Roquan Smith, and Nick Kwiatkowski had to come in and fill a role, and he did so really well. You need a guy like a Jack Sanborn because not only can he make a huge impact as a downhill linebacker, because that's what he is. He's a downhill fly to the football linebacker. He's not. If you're going to put him in a lot of pass coverage, good luck. He just doesn't have the foot speed, doesn't have the quickness to do it. But first and second down, he's that type of linebacker, and his best attribute, special teams. So I see a guy that is developing from an undrafted free agent to a rotational piece at that inside linebacker position and maybe just an alternate linebacker replacement, as well as a key special teams guy on a pretty solid special team so far. So I think maybe not superstardom, maybe not starter or anything like that for him. I certainly don't expect it, but he has definitely developed into, I think, a rotational piece at that linebacker position, and certainly the first guy to come off the bench with any type of injury. So, depending on who they're able to acquire in the offseason, and maybe you say, hey, with a Jack Sanborn, we're not going to put as much emphasis on that inside linebacker position. We're going to maybe emphasize defensive line a little bit more because we just feel like rebuilding this defense is going to take more than an off season. Let's not focus on an area that we feel is okay versus an area that's maybe more weak. So I think Sanborn maybe can do that for you, but definitely in terms of expectations, I think you just want to see him continue to be this player where you feel comfortable if he's starting or if he has to play because of injury. And on top of it, you know he's going to kill it on special teams. And he's just got that energy and that edge that I think you want in a backup player where they have their opportunity, they're coming downhill, and that's all they're doing.
yeah, no, yeah, and I like the energy and especially, the fact that he almost had an interception. Of course, it, was waved off by a penalty, and that's where I'm going to with this next thing is there's a lot of penalties. A total of 11, 9 that went against the Bears. Do you attribute that more to the Bears making mistakes, which they're obviously prone to making a lot of mistakes, or do you just, attribute more to the refs? I mean, Eddie Jackson even had said, obviously, they're not going to always be happy with a lot of calls like this, but he called it, quote, BS. So some of the calls were BS. What did you think when you're watching the game? You thought more of the refs or it was more the Bears?
Ultimately, I still tend to go more player no
Hmm.
matter what. I'm not gonna lie to you. That Chase Claypool non-call last week was
Hmm.
a something.
Yeah.
That was a something to see that not get called. I mean, how many times I've seen questionable pass interference in my life, and to not see that.
Hmm.
I think a lot of that stuff kind of evens out. What was it? I want to almost like equate that Chase Claypool to the Megatron incident with like where it started that rule of having to complete the process after the catch,
Yeah.
and like the Bears got so lucky in that win. I remember that so vividly, and it was like it created a rule change. So to me, in a way, it's almost like that evened out after all these
Yeah.
years, and I'm a believer in that. I definitely think the Bears have been getting some of the shaft on some of these calls, but they're also, I think, hurting themselves too. Some of the guys that were called for penalties, like Jalen Johnson, he didn't have a good game, regardless of those penalties. Braxton Jones, he didn't have a great game, regardless of those penalties. So there's a lot, I think, that is brought on by yourself. And ultimately, I think that the Bears, when you see some of the penalties that happen, it was after that 24-10 lead. I think, one thing that we keep talking about, like, hey, you want to lose, you want to get these draft picks, or you got the other people are like, no, you got to win some of these games so you learn how to win for the future, blah, blah, blah. I almost think yesterday was another kind of best case scenario like the week before where I do think they were trying to win the game. They just lost it because they don't know how to win games.
Mhm.
And a lot of those penalties started happening when they thought the game was over, when they thought, oh, 24-10 against the hapless Lions, this is going to be a cakewalk the rest of the way. We don't even need to try anymore. They've already given up. And I think that's when you saw a lot more penalties. You saw a lot more just timidness, less aggressiveness, less just playing free. And that is a part of learning how to win. So that loss certainly helps their draft stock. I don't think they were trying to lose that game. So I don't have a big problem that they've lost a game. They don't have a great defense. Justin Fields made a critical mistake late in that game, and you're going to see that from a young quarterback. If you think Justin Fields is done making mistakes, it's still too early for that. A lot of
Mhm.
people think it's like year 3 or year 4 for him. We haven't even gotten through year 2, and he hasn't even played a full year yet in his
Mhm.
career. So we got to just kind of, I think, just look at this team honestly a lot. And some of these penalties, certainly they're given the shaft by the ref with some of these things for sure. But it's also a young team that's not executing. You don't get the benefits of calls when that happens.
Yeah, no, that is true, and it's like a lot of people forget too. It's just the whole process. It's still just not necessarily just beginning, but it's still not. Yeah, I feel like we're not even halfway. I feel like it's just what it feels like with a
Yeah,
lot of
we're in
players.
the
With
early
Fields,
stages.
yeah, exactly. And with Fields, it feels like it's almost like I think the reason, and I'm not saying that this is where I'm at, but like I think the reason why some people see it or feel like he's ahead of the game is just because of like some of the games he's had. But yeah, still a long way to go with him for sure. But now looking ahead to the next matchup, they're going on a road trip, a little bit of a 2 game road trip. So it starts in Atlanta. They have a run attack too. With Marcus Mariota, he's not necessarily Lamar Jackson, but he collects his 5 yards of carry. They also have former Bear Cordarrelle Patterson. So what do you think, or what do you expect from that matchup at the Falcons?
I honestly expect a pretty similar game to this one. Um, Overall, I think Atlanta, they've got some talented coaches there, but they're not a talented roster. And they got some players like Kylie Pitts, Cordell Patterson. You've talked about him. They can definitely do some things. They're not totally inept or anything like that, but it's another very winnable game for the Bears. And not that they need to win games because I'm not on that boat. Like if you lose a lot of games, but you look like a team progressing, I'm pretty happy with that
Mhm.
overall. I definitely agree with that crowd that's saying, hey, you need to learn how to win. I think there is something to that. It would concern me if they lost this game because now you're starting to see some of these lower tier quarterbacks beating Justin Fields and the Bears. And I get it, they don't have a defense, but you have to win some of these games when, you look at the rosters on both sides and you're thinking, well, Bears have a star quarterback. You got to start winning those type of games. So I think it's very important for them to come with the mindset of we need to control the clock because that's exactly what Atlanta's going to do with their run game. We've got to create some big plays. And offensively, we've got to be relentless because that defense doesn't matter who the opponent is, they're really going to struggle shutting down anybody. So you got to really play 60 minutes if you're on offense. It's not you're the strength of the team whether you know it or not and you have to act like it. So I would expect the Bears if they are you know, steeped in all this player leadership that we've been hearing about, like Fields and some of the other defensive guys like Eddie Jackson. This is one of those games where the leaders have to really step up and say, hey, we gave one away. We're not going to do that in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing too is I kind of want to see like the defense that they played against the Miami Dolphins because if they play like that against a lot of teams, they could squeeze out some wins. So I think that that was kind of like from the last couple of weeks, that was their better game when you compare that to the line. So I think that if they play like that, You never know.
And
But I think that is oh,
also too,
go
with
ahead.
the Lions, you know,
Mhm,
we thought that they could be I mean, if you were not one of those people just automatically the Lions equals bad football, can't do nothing,
mhm,
like the Lions have been scoring all year long. They've been playing pretty good offensive football all year long. They're kind of like the Bears where they just don't have enough talent, but they have some bright spots. And as a team, they're very physical and competitive.
mhm,
Atlanta's very similar to that. They score points. They have been a team that has surprised some, even though we know what they are, which is not a very good team. So if the Bears are thinking, oh, hey, they're not going to score nothing, we can just kind of, and it almost to your point seemed like with Miami, they had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder to try to stop that
mhm.
offense, unlike they did with Detroit. Well, that chip needs to get right back up on the shoulder.
100%, man. And that's a good place to wrap it up for this edition of War Media Bears Recap. I want to thank Ryan Bukovetsky for joining me and for everyone at War. We'll see you in week 11.